I met my first love at my job interview. She walked out of the corner office in a tailored blazer and heels, and the moment our eyes locked, I froze. Completely. Because the woman about to interview me for the job I desperately needed was the same girl who disappeared from my life 20 years ago without saying goodbye. And now she was the boss. But here's what made it worse. She extended her hand, looked me dead in the face, and said, "You must be Mr. Hale. Please come in." Like she didn't know me. Like we hadn't spent 2 years meeting in secret at a covered bridge outside a small town in Ohio. Like she hadn't been my first love, my first heartbreak, and the reason every woman after her felt like a song with the wrong lyrics. My name is Dawson Hale. I'm 38 years old, unemployed, down to my last few weeks of savings. I grew up dirt poor, raised by a seamstress mother in a rented duplex with a father who walked out before I could remember his face. I built myself from nothing. And one person who ever made me feel like I was something, vanished overnight when I was 18. No letter, no call, no goodbye. Her name was Elise Whitford, the mayor's daughter, the girl who was never supposed to love a boy like me. But she did. And then she was gone. But why did she disappear? Why did she pretend not to know me in that interview? What had she been carrying for 20 years that she was too afraid to tell me? And what happens when the first love you never got over is suddenly sitting across the desk deciding your future? I need to take you back. Before the interview. Before the blazer and the handshake, and the way she said, "Mr. Hale," like the name didn't burn her mouth. Back to Cedar Falls, Ohio. Back to when loving her was the only thing I had that felt like mine. I was 16 the first time I saw Elise Whitford, chemistry class, 3rd row. She turned around to borrow a pencil and hit me with a smile that rewired my brain on the spot. She was the mayor's daughter. I was the kid, whose mama hemmed dresses out of the kitchen to keep the lights on. In a town like Cedar Falls, that gap wasn't just distance, it was a wall. But Elise didn't see walls. She saw me. We started talking after class, then before class, then between every class. By 17, I was in love so deep I couldn't see the surface anymore. But her father, Conrad Whitford, owned half that town and ran the other half. If he knew his daughter was spending time with a boy from a rented duplex, he'd have buried me before breakfast. So we hid. We met at the covered bridge on the east edge of town. Old wood, creek water underneath, fireflies in the summer so thick it looked like the air was full of tiny stars. That bridge became our world. I'd sit on the railing and she'd lean against me and we'd talk until the moon was high and the crickets were the only other voices left. One evening, I took out my pocket knife and carved our initials into the center beam, DH plus EW. She watched me do it with tears in her eyes. "Why are you crying?" I asked. "Because you just made us permanent," she whispered, "and I've never had anything permanent before." I kissed her that night like she was the last real thing left in the world. And for 2 years, she was. My mama, Pearl Hale, was everything a mother could be, and more than any kid deserved. 5 foot nothing, hands rough from decades of needle and thread. She worked from 6 a.m. to midnight most days, sewing dresses, hemming pants, patching suits for people who had more money in their pockets than we had in our whole house. My father left when I was 3. She never said his name again. She just kept sewing, kept praying, kept putting plates on the table through sheer stubborn refusal to quit. She knew about Elise. Mama always knew everything. She'd see me come home late with that stupid grin, and she'd shake her head and say, "That girl's going to be either the making of you or the breaking of you, Dawson. I just pray it's the first one." It was the ETE second. One Monday morning, I got to school and Elise's seat was empty. I figured she was sick. By Wednesday, her locker was cleaned out. By Friday, someone in the hallway said the mayor's daughter had been sent to boarding school in Connecticut. No one said why. Everyone knew. I went to the covered bridge that afternoon, sat there until dark. Then I went back the next day. And the next. And every day for 3 months, I sat on that bridge waiting for a girl who was never coming back. I called the Whitford house once. Conrad answered. His voice was flat, cold. "Don't call this number again, son. She's moved on. I suggest you do the same." I held the phone for a long time after he hung up. Then I set it down and something inside me closed. Not broke, closed. Like a door being locked from the inside by someone who decided it was safer to stop feeling than to feel like this ever again. I didn't go to college, couldn't afford it. Took a construction job, got my GED at night. Slowly. Worked my way from hauling materials to coordinating projects. I was smart, self-taught, sharp instincts. I dated 2 long relationships in my 20s and 30s. Good women, kind women. But something was always missing. A frequency I couldn't find. A shape inside me that nobody else fit into. I couldn't name it then. I can name it now. It was her. It was always her. By 38, my company downsized. I was out, savings draining fast, rent coming due. I applied everywhere, got 1 call back. Whitford and Breck Development, project coordinator position, good firm, growing company. I pressed my only suit, knotted my only tie, and walked into that lobby praying this was the fresh start I needed. I didn't know my past was sitting in the corner office waiting for me. The interview lasted 40 minutes. She asked professional questions. I gave professional answers. But underneath every sentence, a different conversation was happening. Every time our eyes met, 20 years of silence screamed between us. She asked about my experience, and I talked about project timelines. But what I really wanted to say was, "Why did you leave me?" Her hands were steady on the desk, but I saw her pen trembling when she wrote notes. I saw her swallow hard when I said Cedar Falls on my resume. I saw the crack in her mask when I mentioned working construction since I was 18, the same year she vanished. At the end, she stood, extended her hand again. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Hale." I took her hand, held it 1 second longer than professional, and said quietly, "It's Dawson, you know that." Something flashed in her eyes, pain, recognition, fear. Then the mask slid back and she nodded. "We'll be in touch." 2 days later, she called with the offer, professional tone, clean sentences. But right before she hung up, a pause, a breath. Then, "Welcome to the team, Dawson." Not Mr. Hale. Dawson, and the way she said my name sounded exactly the way it did when she was 17 and whispering it at our bridge. But pretended not to know me. A woman who was pretended not to know me, a woman who was now my boss. And every day I walked into that building, the distance between professional and personal got thinner. But what I didn't know yet, what would take weeks of tension and silence and almost moments to uncover, was that Elise Whitford hadn't pretended not to know me because she'd forgotten. She pretended because she was carrying a secret so heavy that the moment she let it out, it would change everything I believed about the last 20 years of my life. The first few weeks were professional torture. We existed in the same building, the same meetings, the same air, and neither of us said a word about what we both knew was suffocating the room. She assigned me to a high-profile redevelopment project. I told myself it was because I was qualified, but every time she passed my desk and our eyes caught for half a second too long, I knew qualification had nothing to do with it. She wanted me close. She just couldn't say it. Nash Brierly, my best friend from the construction days, saw it on my face over beers one night. "Something's eating you and it ain't the job." I told him everything. Elise, the bridge, 20 years, the interview. He stared at me. "Your first love is your boss, and you're just sitting there pretending that's normal? What am I supposed to do, Nash? Fight for her. She left me. Did she? Or is that just the story you've been telling yourself because the truth is too scary to chase?" I didn't answer. Because he was right and I hated it. Then Reed Calloway made things worse. Senior VP, tall, polished, expensive watch, the kind of man who smells like old money and entitlement. He'd been pursuing Elise for over a year. Fancy dinners, strategic compliments. She never reciprocated, but he never stopped. And the moment he sensed the energy between me and Elise, something behind his eyes turned predatory. He started undermining me in meetings, questioning my credentials, assigning impossible deadlines. "I just wonder if project coordinators really belong in executive-level discussions," he said it smiling, the kind of smile that hides a knife. I kept my head down, did the work, but the walls between Elise and me were getting thinner by the day. Our hands brushed passing a file, and neither of us pulled away fast enough. A late night in the conference room turned into a conversation that drifted from project timelines to, "Do you ever go back to Cedar Falls?" And suddenly the room was too small, and the past was too loud. One evening, I was leaving late. The office was empty except for a light under her door. I should have kept walking, but I stopped, knocked once. "Come in." She was sitting behind her desk, jacket off, hair down, eyes tired. She looked like a woman who'd been holding something together for so long that the effort itself had become exhausting. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to tell me the truth." She went still. "Why did you pretend not to know me at that interview?" Silence. Long. Heavy. The kind that bends the air. "Because if I said your name the way I wanted to, I would have fallen apart in front of my entire staff." My chest tightened. "Then why did you leave, Elise? 20 years, no letter, no call, nothing. I went to that bridge every day for 3 months. Her eyes filled, her jaw clenched. She stood up, walked to the window, kept her back to me. "You think I left you?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You think I chose to go?" That's what it looked like from where I was standing. She turned around, tears falling, hands shaking. "I wrote you 14 letters, Dawson, one every week for 3.5 months. I begged my father to let me come home. I begged him to let me call you. I wrote until my hand cramped and my tears smudged the ink. 14 letters. The room tilted. "I never got a single one," I said. Her face crumbled. "I know. Because my father intercepted everyone. He burned them, all 14. And when you never wrote back, I thought you'd moved on. I thought you forgot about me." I couldn't breathe. 20 years. 20 years of believing she chose to leave. 20 years of thinking a poor kid from a duplex wasn't enough for the mayor's daughter. And the truth was that she fought for me. She wrote for me. And a powerful man burned every word because I wasn't good enough for his bloodline. "I went to that bridge every single day," I said, voice breaking. "I carved our initials into the wood because I thought it would make us permanent. And you were gone, and I thought it meant I was never worth staying for." She crossed the room, took my face in both hands, tears streaming. "You were worth every letter, every single one, and I have spent 20 years hating myself for not finding a way back to you." But the letters weren't the only secret, because what I didn't know yet, what would come to light in the most unexpected way, was that my own mother had known the truth for years, and she'd kept it buried to protect me. And what was about to happen next would either destroy everything or finally, after 2 decades, bring 2 stolen hearts back to where they always belonged. That Sunday, I drove to my mother's house. Pearl was in the kitchen, sewing machine humming, reading glasses on her nose. Same woman, same strength, same kitchen where she'd kept us alive on thread and prayer. "Mama, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth." She stopped sewing, looked at me, and I watched 20 years of a secret move across her face like a shadow. "You knew about the letters, didn't you?" Her hands started trembling. She folded them in her lap, pressed her lips together. And then Lorraine Hale, the strongest woman I'd ever known, broke down at her own kitchen table. "Conrad came to this house the night he found out," she whispered, "stood right there in that doorway. Told me if you didn't stay away from Elise, he'd make sure I never sewed another dress in this town again. He owned half the buildings, Dawson. He owned our landlord. He owned my clients. One phone call, and we'd have been on the street." My fists clenched. I didn't know about the letters then. I found out years later from a woman who cleaned the Whitford house. She said Elise wrote you every week, said Conrad burned them in his office fireplace. Mama's voice shattered. "I should have told you. I was trying to protect you, but I think I just made the wound deeper." I knelt beside her chair, took her hands, those rough, worn, beautiful hands that had sewn 1,000 dresses to keep me fed. "You kept us alive, Mama. You did what you had to do." She cupped my face, tears falling into the creases of her palms. "That girl loved you, Dawson. She always did. Don't let any more time get stolen from you." I drove to Elise's apartment that night. She opened the door, saw my face, knew immediately. "Your mother told you." "Everything." She stepped aside. I walked in. And for the first time in 20 years, we sat across from each other with no desk between us, no job titles, no pretending. Just two people who'd been robbed of each other by a man who thought love had a price. Tag. I hated you for years, I said. Not real hate, the kind you only feel for someone you can't stop loving. I thought you looked at me and saw a poor kid who wasn't worth a goodbye. Her chin trembled. I looked at you and saw the only person who ever made me feel real. And losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Worse than my father's control. Worse than marrying a man I didn't love. Worse than any of it. You married? Philip Rance. I was 28. He looked right on paper. Cold, controlling, made me feel invisible. Divorced by 32. She paused. I married him because I thought the kind of love we had wasn't real, that it was just a teenage thing. But every year that passed, every empty relationship, every quiet night alone, I realized it wasn't teenage anything. It was the realest thing I've ever felt, and I let my father take it from me. You didn't let him. He took it. From both of us. She looked at me with 20 years of unsaid words shining in her eyes. I never stopped loving you, Dawson. Not once. Not for a single day. I know. Because I never stopped either. That night we didn't kiss. We didn't rush. We just talked. For 6 hours straight. About everything. The lost years, the covered bridge, the initials in the wood, the letters she wrote that I never read. We laughed about chemistry class. She cried about her mother, Ruth, who died of Alzheimer's 3 months before our interview. I held her hand while she told me about watching the disease steal her mother's mind one memory at a time. About Ruth playing Chopin with her eyes closed and then one day not remembering what a piano was. She would have loved you, Elise said quietly. She would have loved that you found your way back, I said. The next morning, everything was different. Not fixed, different. The kind of different that happens when two people stop pretending and start choosing each other. But Reed Calloway wasn't finished. He discovered our history through office gossip and went to the board, tried to frame it as a conflict of interest, called an emergency meeting, painted me as an opportunist who charmed his way in through an old relationship. I didn't let Elise fight alone. I walked into that boardroom and resigned. I'm leaving. Not because anything inappropriate happened, but because Elise Whitford built this company from nothing after her father's stroke, and I refuse to be the excuse a jealous man uses to tear it down. I looked at Reed. She turned you down because she wanted to, not because of me. That's the part you can't accept. Reed's face went white. The board dismissed his complaint, but I'd already made my decision. I walked out. Elise caught me in the parking garage, furious. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did, because 20 years ago a powerful man took you from me and I couldn't do anything about it. Today, a powerful man tried again, and this time I had a choice. She stared at me. So what now? Now I build something of my own, and I do it right. I started my own project coordination consultancy. Small office, second-hand desk. Nash helped me paint the walls on a Saturday while eating cold pizza and making fun of my business cards. Elise was my first client, not because of charity, because my work was good. She knew it then. She knew it at that interview. She'd always known. Months passed, real months. We dated like two people making up for stolen time. I met her for dinners where we closed down restaurants. She came to my mama's house, and Pearl hugged her in the kitchen doorway for so long that I had to clear my throat to remind them I existed. Mama pulled back, held Elise's face, and said, 20 years I've been praying you'd come back to my boy. Elise cried. Pearl cried. I stood there pretending something was in my eye, and Nash texted me from the living room. Bro, are you crying in there? I didn't answer. Because yes, I was. Elise and Pearl became inseparable. And Pearl. Sunday dinners. Phone calls. Pearl taught Elise to sew a button. Elise taught Pearl how to use a tablet so she could video call instead of running up her phone bill. They talked about Ruth, about Alzheimer's, about what it means to lose a mother. Pearl held Elise's hands across the same kitchen table where Conrad had once stood and threatened to destroy everything. And she said, You have a mother again, sweetheart. Right here. For as long as God gives me breath. One Saturday morning in October, I drove Elise back to Cedar Falls. She hadn't been home in years. The town looked smaller, quieter. The Whitford mansion was sold. Conrad was in a care facility after his stroke, unable to speak, unable to control anything or anyone ever again. I didn't visit him. Some doors deserved to stay closed. We drove to the covered bridge. It was still there, older, weathered, creek still running underneath. No fireflies this time, just autumn leaves drifting through the air like the earth was exhaling after holding its breath for 20 years. We walked to the center beam, and there they were, faded, barely visible, but carved deep enough to survive 2 decades of rain and wind and time. DH plus EW. Elise traced the letters with her fingertips, tears falling. "You made us permanent," she whispered. Same words she'd said at 17. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out a small box, not velvet, not fancy, just a plain wooden box I'd made myself in Nash's workshop. Inside was a ring, thin gold band, simple, a tiny emerald because her eyes were the first thing I ever noticed and the last thing I think about every night. "I carved this when I was 17 because I knew," I said. "I'm 38 now and I still know. 20 years, Elise, 20 years of missing you, 20 years of looking for you in every room I walked into. Your father took the letters, time took the years, but nothing took this." I put my hand on my chest. "This has been yours since chemistry class, 3rd row. Borrowed pencil. And it will be yours until they put me in the ground." She was sobbing, hands over her mouth, shoulders shaking, standing on the same bridge where 2 teenagers once believed love could be carved into wood and last forever. "Will you marry me?" She dropped to her knees on that old wooden bridge, took my face in both hands, creek water running beneath us, autumn leaves falling around us, and she said the word she'd been waiting 20 years to say. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. I slid the ring on her finger. She kissed me, and the covered bridge held us the way it always had, steady, solid, permanent, just like I promised when I carved those letters into the wood with a pocket knife and a heart full of something I was too young to name but old enough to feel forever. So if you're listening right now and you think your love story ended too soon, hear me. Some love stories don't end. They just pause. And the pause can last a year or a decade or 20 years. But if the love is real, if it was carved deep enough, it survives. Rain, wind, time, distance, even the cruelty of powerful men who think they can burn letters and erase what 2 hearts chose in secret, they can't. Love like that doesn't burn. It waits. Now I need you to close your eyes for a second and think about this. Your first love. The one who made your heart beat different for the very first time. The one who changed what love meant before you even understood the word. If they were standing in front of you right now, 10, 15, 20 years later, and they said, "I never forgot you," what would you say back? Would you let them in again? Or has too much time passed? Tell me in the comments. Don't hold back. Because the person scrolling right after you might need to hear that first love stories don't always have to end with goodbye. Sometimes they end with welcome home. If this story moved something inside your chest, if it made you remember someone you haven't thought about in years, hit that subscribe button right now. Tap that notification bell wherever you're watching from. Because this channel is where lost love stories come to remind you that some things are worth waiting for. Even if the wait takes 20 years. I'll see you in the next one.